The huia was one of the only 3 species in the family of wattle birds, but in other respects, it was unique. It lived in the once remote forests of the North Island of New Zealand, getting its name from the soft fluting sound of its cry, which seemed to hang in the air. A single pair of huias would command a large area, so they never became common birds. Rain and constant damp rotted the dead trees, and the huias used to feed on the hoo-hoo grubs and insects under the loose bark. Its white-tipped feathers were unmistakable and gave it an almost striped appearance. The bird measured as much as 48 centimeters from its long and elegant tail to its beak. Among all its attributes, the huia's beak made it most unusual. In appearance, the male's beak was very different to that of the female's. The reason for this difference was a unique feeding arrangement between the birds who formed lifelong pairs. Much like this nectar-feeding sunbirds, the female's beak was long and hooked, perfect for getting into tiny crevices. The male's was shorter, more like this acorn woodpecker's. His was developed for stripping off bark and eating the grubs beneath. Then she would delve deeper into the holes he was unable to reach. At first, naturalists thought they were 2 distinct species. But on closer inspection, the extraordinary truth was confirmed. The huia was a sacred bird to the Maoris. Only chiefs were allowed to wear its tail feathers in their hair and its beaks around their necks. These ornaments were kept in wooden boxes, often decorated with a lizard, a warning to thieves and a symbol of death. One myth explains how a chief pulled a nesting huia's beak into a hook so that she could preen herself as her tail had become tattered. Maori men believed that if they dreamt of a skull decorated with huia feathers, their wives would soon have a baby girl. The Reverend William Yeat, in 1835, was the first European to describe the huia's beauty and symbolism. Unfortunately, he also wrote about the delicious taste of its flesh and its exact range, a useful guide for later hunters. As European settlement spread, this range became smaller when trees were cut down to provide land. Maori feather collecting had not affected the huia population too much, but the destruction of their habitat posed a severe threat. The worst, however, was yet to come. Just after the turn of the century, the Duke and Duchess of York visited New Zealand. The future King of England was warmly welcomed and honoured by the Maoris as a chief. At one point, a Maori woman took a huia feather from her own hair and offered it to the Duke. He wore it in the band of his hat, and by doing so, unwittingly, passed a death sentence on the species. European dignitaries and others wanted huia feathers to wear in their hats too. As the bird began to disappear, their value to hunters grew. On December the 28th, 1907, the last living huia was seen flying into the forest. Without a mate, she couldn't have survived long. The fine feathered huia became the fashion follower's victim.